I'm Christy and welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you've never been here before. And in today's video, I'm here to share my favorite new to me authors that I read in 2022. I have about 15-ish authors to talk about today that I read for the first time, whether they were debut authors this year who just put out their books this year, or authors that I just finally read for the first time this year and fell in love with. So first up is Nikki Castle, and her first book that I read was 5 Rounds. I have read her entire backlist at this point, which, I mean, granted is like 3 books and a novella, but still. Actually read 5 Rounds at the very beginning of January of 2022. It was one of my first reads of the new year. This book was actually recommended to me from that like 12 reads from 12 friends challenge that I did last year as well. And so I was so excited to read this. I actually had to wait until the second book came out because it hadn't been released yet. So yeah, I fell in love with this book and Nikki Castle. This series kind of centers around an MMA fighting group. This one in particular, the heroine and the hero, they are both MMA fighters. She actually ends up having to become roommates with him. His roommate is her best friend, and her and the hero are like enemies, but they have to share his place together for like a week and a half or so. So it is their romance. It is such a fun time. Definitely check out Nikki Castle if you haven't. Also in January of 2022, I read Still Beating by Jennifer Hartman. I fell in love with this book and read a couple more Jennifer Hartman books in that month as well. This is a dark romance where the hero and the heroine are actually kidnapped together and held captive, and they have to do some very like disgusting things with their captor and with one another that he forces them to do. The hero and the heroine had kind of a hateful banter before that. The hero is actually the heroine's sister's fiance, I want to say. So yeah, they have some history as well. The book is definitely dark. They're not held captive the entire time. They do get out, and it's kind of the realizing or coming to terms with everything that they went through down in that basement together. Such a beautiful book. I got to meet Jennifer Hartman in Vegas at the Love in Vegas signing, so I got this signed and have like a fun little bookmark from her. She's just like such a sweet person, and I have loved so many of her books this year. In February, I ended up reading Ruthless by Anne Stewart. This is the first book in her House of Rohan series, and I loved this book so much. I definitely want to read the entire series now and still need to. This is a darker historical romance. If you love like the anti-hero or kind of the villain getting his story, this is what the hero in this one is. Next in February, I also jumped into the Kings of Italy series by Mila Finelli. And so Mafia Mistress is the first book in the series, and Mafia Madman is the third book. They are both my favorites in the series. This is just a fun time if you love mafia romances. They are set in Italy as well, which is just like a really fun time. And then in March, I ended up reading Waking Olivia by Elizabeth O'Rourke. This is a Hello Lovely box special edition. This one, the heroine is in college and she is on like her cross-country team, and she actually sleep runs and then ends up being her romance with her coach, who they're actually like just a couple years apart. So it's a little bit forbidden just because of the fact that the college doesn't want the coach and the student to date, but like in years wise, they are just like a few years apart. Which after reading this book, I went on a deep dive and actually ended up reading Elizabeth O'Rourke's entire backlist. So I have read all of her books. I have a whole like author's guide to her books on my channel. I also was able to interview her on Jess from Peace Love Books channel as well, which I will link that interview if you missed it. Favorite 2 from her are Parallel. This is a time travel, very like soulmates vibe series. And then A Deal with the Devil. This is like a contemporary kind of hate to love. The heroine has to work for the hero and kind of their fun banter. Just like really fun, witty romance. And then in April, I read Elisa Braden for the first time, and this is one of the books from her Rescued from Ruin series. There are like 9 or 10 books in the series. I've read them all, love the entire series so much. This one is book 5, When a Girl Loves an Earl, and one of my favorites, which if you're looking for a new like indie historical romance author who is really good, definitely check out her books. Her books are on Kindle Unlimited, and she has this Rescued from Ruin series and then another series which is a Midnight in Scotland. There are only 3 books in that series so far, and they are a spin-off from her Rescued from Ruin characters in series. So definitely check her books out if you haven't. She has a very like similar writing vibe as like Elisa Kleypas or Julia Quinn, kind of that style of writing, and I just love her books so much. In May, I read Sarah Kate for the first time when she started blowing up. So the first book in her Salacious Players Club series is Praise. And I loved it so much. This whole series takes place around these co-owners who own a like BDSM style kink club. This one is Age Gap, with the heroine actually falling for her ex-boyfriend's father. Definitely love this one. And Give Me More is my second favorite in the series, and this one is an MMF relationship between a married couple and then their best friend. Sarah Kate is just amazing. I met her at the Love in Vegas book signing as well, and she's just such a fun person. I've read and loved this whole series. I have gone into her backlist as well and have been diving into that and reading all of those books. So yeah, just a great author to check out if you haven't. Also in May, I actually ended up reading an arc of Up All Night with a Good Duke by Amy Rose Bennett. This is a historical romance book that came out this year. I love how floppy this book is. But anyways, this was my first time reading this author. I loved it. So by day, the heroine is a finishing school teacher, and then by night, she is a gothic romance writer, and then the hero is a single dad, widowed duke who needs to find a wife and needs help with his teenage daughter as well. So it becomes a kind of marriage of convenience situation. Loved this one so much and definitely can't wait to check out more from this author in the future. And in August, I actually ended up reading Elsie Silver for the first time, which I read Flawless, which I don't have a copy of it, but it is right here. And that book was getting a lot of hype at the time, and I was excited to check it out. That book actually didn't work for me as well. I think I gave it like 3.5 stars, but Heartless, like, whole other story. So if you didn't love that book like me, definitely read Heartless. It is everything. Like 20% into this book, I knew it was going to be an all-time favorite. The growth of the author just between these two books was very noticeable for me, and I love this one. This has a single dad, grumpy ranch hero, and then the heroine is the nanny who comes and stays with him and his son for the summer to take care of his son, and she just brings like so much fun and banter and like lots of caretaking in this book. Like, ugh, just loved it so much. Can't wait to check out more books from Elsie Silver in the future and see all the new books that she brings to us in 2023. Also in August, I read Between Hello and Goodbye by Emma Scott. I loved this book so much. This was my first time reading Emma Scott, but I know she has an entire backlist that I need to get into, and I'm excited to do that in 2023. The contemporary romance that is just filled with life and love and loss, kind of heartbreak and grief and coming through that on the other side. It's a beautiful book and I loved it so much. It's definitely one of my favorite reads of the year. And then in October, I read Sanctum by Hannah McBride. This is actually a YA paranormal shifter series, but I just fell in love with it and was blown away by the book. I loved it so much. This was actually a book club pick for the Cover to Cover book club in October. I actually went into it thinking it was an adult fantasy romance series. It was kind of thrown off when it was YA, but I ended up loving it. Like, it gave me all of those like classic nostalgia YA fantasy vibe that I loved, and like just such a great book. I want to continue on because I know book 2 and 3 follow the same couple of this one. Just definitely a great shifter series, which I also thought was super exciting that this book was actually the author's debut in 2020. So like a relatively new author as well. And also in October, I read Haven by Claire Kent. This is the first book. It's her Kindled post-apocalyptic romance series. I fell in love with this series and everything that Claire Kent writes with this book. I had such a good time reading this entire series, reading other books by Claire Kent as well. Definitely check it out if you love post-apocalyptic, kind of like survival stories and like romances in that. So in October, I read Nobody's Duke by Scarlett Scott and fell in love with this book so much. This is the first book in her League of Dukes series. This book was actually on my TBR because I heard it was like, again, the magic vibes, that kind of like second chance historical romance vibe. It definitely has those vibes, but has its own little story going on as well. And it is just such a good time. I can't wait to binge this entire series and to just dive into Scarlett Scott's backlist in January. So this book is basically a second chance romance between a couple who were together 8 years ago in the past, and then now the heroine is a widowed single mom, and the hero actually has to become her bodyguard. Love this romance so much. Definitely a great one to check out. Another like great indie historical romance author. Then in November, I read B.K. Borison for the first time. I ended up binging the entire Lovelight series, which there are 3 books in the series. In the Weeds is book 2, and one of my favorites is going to be on my top reads of the year list. I love this whole series so much. Small town series set around this Christmas tree farm. Each book as well kind of follows a different season and a different couple. The way she writes heroes is just so good. Love this, love her books. Can't wait to check out what she has for us in 2023. And then in November, I also read Restore Me by J.L. Seegers. This was such a great book. She definitely instantly became a new favorite author of mine, and I can't wait to read more of her books. If you love Kennedy Ryan's kind of writing style with those like emotional hits and that just like beautiful writing, she is very similar to that. In this one, the heroine is actually a widow, and it actually becomes her romance with her late husband's best friend who actually always hated her. So it is their romance. There's definitely more to the story than that. Very emotional hitting as well. Loved it so much. And then lastly, my new favorite to me author is Morgan Elizabeth with 'Tis the Season for Revenge. I love this book so much, and it definitely is worth all the hype that everybody loved it this year. This one is kind of Legally Blonde inspired, with the heroine getting dumped by her lawyer boyfriend at the beginning of the story and deciding she's going to get revenge on him by dating and banging his boss at his law firm and getting that guy to invite her to the Christmas party that her boyfriend would never take her to. It's just such a great book. I've talked about it like countless times on some of my favorites of the year list. The hero in this is amazing. The way he worships the heroine. Ugh, just love this book so much, and I can't wait to read more from Morgan Elizabeth in 2023. So those are all my favorite new to me authors that I read in 2022. Let me know in the comments if you've read any of these authors, or maybe what some of your favorite new to you authors were for the year. I'd love to know. And if you haven't done so yet, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any of my future videos, and I'll see you in my next one.